Hey there, everybody, and welcome back as we are finishing up this application. Again, it's a social/sharing app that we are making completely free. So at this point, we have essentially set up functionality to be able to post to the app in a forum, and we've created a little bit more of a complex forum. And then we've enabled the ability to actually post and change the URL. So the last thing that we're going to do is finalize the item page and update. The reason I didn't cover this in the previous video is we have an added step that I want to cover here. So if you have any questions about where we are, on this page over here, I have the app that we're essentially in the process of building. And over here, I have the application that's already been completed. So at this point, you've ideally had or added this section where you have maybe a couple of different options. So essentially when a user in my application clicks a drop down and they choose this is a light roast, medium roast, dark roast, etc., it's added to this corresponding area. Each of these corresponding areas have a scroll view container. Inside is a container that repeats with whatever the roast is. Now that roast corresponds to something in Firebase like this, which is light. So it corresponds to a URL, which is a data resource. So in summary, your data resources are up here, and I have a data resource for every single forum option or something someone can post to. That way it's a unique URL that we can grab and work with. So again, to add the data resource, you can check out the previous videos on the forum posts, and we kind of went into more detail. But now what we need to do is actually view this page. Well, here's where it's going to get a little trickier. So what we need to do, because we want this page to have update functionality, so we're going to click on the detailed view here for the logic, and we're going to click on this first record. So we closed off in the last video opening the page for that item that you have. In this case, it's the light roast page in Firebase. Now, I've added an extra step here, which we're going to do together now. So, go up here and click Data, and then what we're going to do, actually, we're going to add a variable. That's going to make it a little easier. So we're going to add an app variable, because we want this to be global. And we're going to put new item URL. So you just click Add Variable, type in new item URL, and click Save. And then at this point, we will remove the slider or move it to the left. And now we're going to go here and click on the logic, and you're going to drag over set app variable. And once you've dragged it over, here's what we're going to do. You're going to connect the component tap to this, connect this to the open page that you had earlier, and then when we select this, we're going to go over here and change the variable, and we're going to set the app variable to new item URL. And then we're going to go to assigned value. Now here you're going to have to dig for the information that you actually need. So here's what we're looking for. You're going to go to formula, then you're going to go to data variables, and you're looking for something that looks kind of like this. So the idea is we need to tell this the URL that we're actually going to be working with. What I mean by that is, if we look at our Firebase, you'll see these documents all have different URLs that allow us to know what is what. Well, we actually grabbed this in AppGyver, so we need to save it now. Now, if you're confused because your names all look different than mine, don't worry about it. You can scroll through and kind of figure out. So if we see data, so we know it's a data variable, and we know that it's for our light roast, or in your case, whatever yours is named. So we are going to scroll through, and we know that light is the next one, because these are in alphabetical order, I believe. And then we're looking for something with that 0.name. So you'll see right here, we have that right here, but it has fields next to it. If we go down, we'll see this. You're looking for something similar, so it'll be the data variable dot whatever the name of that collection is, 0 in brackets dot name. And when you click it, you'll see an example here, and this is actually that URL. So you'll see this is the URL, and this pulls the entire half of the URL, if you remember everything to the right of V1. So you're going to find this and click Save. And this is saving. And what this is doing is on this page, we have access to this URL, but the next page we don't. So we're saving it so that we can access it on the next page, and then we're opening that page. Then you need to do this again for each individual one, because if you remember correctly, all of these have different URLs. So this one is now data.lightmedium1 in brackets .name. So you'll repeat the process. You're going to go to the data variables section over here. You'll scroll through. You're going to find the one that looks like it corresponds and has that example URL that's the last half. Click Save and just repeat the process going all the way down, and make sure that open page is the last step. Now, once we have done this, at this point you need to go ahead and create a new page. So we'll go up here and you're going to add a new page, and this is the page for your item. So we're going to look at what my page looks like just to make it make a little bit more sense. So you'll see I have coffee wall post, coffee wall, and then coffee item. So coffee item is where the information is displayed. So when a user posts that information, it's all collected here. So here's how I've set mine up. In the top is the name, and then we have the data resource in repeat. This actually isn't in repeat. These are those page parameters. So up here, if you slide, go to page parameters, you're going to need to add a parameter for every single option that you want the user to see. And again, this is the info from that Firebase database. If this is still a little confusing, watch back over the video where we created the forums side by side together. The reason I'm showing you what I already have here is I'm hoping that you've kind of learned how to display that information. Now, this is specifically for a coffee item. The post page that I want you to see that I think will make it a little bit easier is this coffee wall post. So this is where we're posting to. And this is the coffee wall itself. So now we need to find the actual, let's see where it is. So we're finding the actual coffee item. I think in this situation is actually the coffee item. So again, you can see how the naming is incredibly important. So I was actually on the correct page, I apologize. So you see how we have this page laid out. So this is how I want you to kind of set yours up. So you're going to set up how you want the information displayed, and then we're going to connect it. So for me, I have the name up top in bold centered, and then I have this row here. So to create this, you'll just drag over a row, and then you can add a container or a password field, whatever you want it to be. For me, I just put a paragraph on the left and on the right. And then I repeated that through here, and then here is added on. So what I did for this is you can actually go to formula, and you'll see that there is this moderately complex looking formula here, but there's a created parameter. So once you've laid out all of this, we're going to go up here and go to variables and go to page parameters, and we're going to add a parameter for everything. So here's how this is set up. I have company, description, roast, where, and added on. So I'm going to go up here, go to parameters. You'll see all of those here, roast, name, etc., created. Now, if you want this created date to be formatted, you can click on the option here, and you're going to set the data variable to the page parameter, and you're going to set the created date and click it. And then when you click this button here, we're going to change the binding to formula and then select here. And then this will give us options to, it'll autofill with the page variable or page parameter for date. So if you remember previously, what we did was we went to format. So we'll type this out together. So you'll go to format, date, time with time zone. And we'll scroll down, find the one that we used previously. We'll highlight all the way across and hit Control C. We're going to go in here, and I'm going to space over so we're typing this from scratch. We'll paste in format, date, time with time zone. And then we're going to delete everything here. And we're going to put in the parameter for created. So you'll see if we type in param, there's created. And then we're going to choose how we want this to be displayed. So we're just going to remove the seconds because I don't think people really need to see that. And then you'll see that this almost looks the same as what we have here. Everything matches, except we added something to make it a little different. So what I put here is, when you have this part typed up, right before it, you can actually type out a double quote, added on, space, double quote, and then plus, and then you'll allow for one space, and then all that information. So here's what this is going to do. Now yours will look like this. Double quote, added on, space, and then what it's going to do is format the parameter for created, which we'll pass over in a little bit, in this format. You can remove the seconds if you want, and you'll click save. So what that'll do is it's going to format it, and then it's going to say this was added on whatever the date is in a newly formatted way. Now, here's where this gets a little bit tricky. We want people to be able to update this on the same page. So we are now going to add in essentially an input field for all of these options. So you're going to scroll down, and we're going to drag over input fields for every field we want people to be able to edit. So that's simple. Just drag your input fields over, go over to variables, page variables, and then add a variable for each individual input field. So there's an input field for all of these, then select the input field, change the label, assign the value to the data variable and the page variable it represents, not the page parameter. Set the page variable for each, and if you have a drop-down, again, you just put the object list, and then you can go to list of objects, add in the label, which is what's displayed, and the value, which is what a user would input. So for example, if a user selected the drop-down and clicked on medium dark, that'd be the equivalent of an input field where a user types in medium-dark. The reason you use a drop-down is in the event that you wanted to make the application look more appealing, to change it up, or if there's a risk of a user mistyping something. For example, light, medium, dark are the options I have in Firebase. If someone misspelled light, then it wouldn't work. So that's why we have it set up this way. And then you'll change all these options. Now, we have everything set up on this page. The only other thing, and this is going to get a little complicated, is we're going to click on this update button. We're going to show the logic. Now, this is what we did in the previous forum page. So I'm going to dissect this with you all together. So the first option on all these if statements are just validating there's information here. So if you click on this and click on formula, this simply says all caps, not open parentheses, all caps is underscore empty, open parentheses, page vars, new name, close parentheses, close parentheses. So this is basically making sure that the page variable new name is not empty. If it's not, then you're going to add a toast message. So here's what you're doing. Over here, you're just dragging in an if statement for each individual item that's on this page here, so we don't mess up the post request and allow it to be empty. So you'll copy over an if statement, then you're going to copy over a post message, which is basically what we have up here. So this toast message, so it'll be if the name's not empty, toast added name, then the next one, not is empty, page vars new description. And you're going to repeat this all the way across. So an if statement for a page variable, and basically for every item in this page that you want the user to be able to update, we need to require them to add information. So new company, name, description, etc. So we'll go back to this update function. So add an if statement for each one. And if example not empty, it moves on to the next one. If it is empty, put a little dialog saying add in whatever that information is. Then we're going to go all the way over, and once you've completed that, we're going to connect to these HTTP requests. So the way that this is set up is I have an HTTP request here, and you'll see the URL is to the new item URL. So the way that I set this up, and this is how we have the update functionality working. If you remember previously, we made an app variable for new item URL, which means when we put in this part right here, which is what we've been adding in from the Firebase docs, if you kind of lost it, just go to Data, choose any of your data resources, and you'll notice it's this exact same resource URL here. So we're going to click on the formula button. And again, for this is an HTTP request. At this point, you've installed this. Just drag it over. Click on HTTP request. And then what you're going to do here is click on the URL, and you're going to paste in that URL in double quotes, space plus space, and then the app variable for your new item URL. And this is going to paste in the other half that we had earlier. So project slash whatever slash document slash light roast, dark roast, medium, etc. Or in your case, if it's video games, food, whatever that may be. And then updated successfully. Now you'll notice these are different. So why is that? Well, here's what I allowed for users to do at this very last step. So the tricky part is I don't want to risk losing an image URL that a user posts. So for example, if someone posts information, so let's look at our app. So we're going to go to a.com and type in this test account I made, and we're going to sign in. Well, if I go to all coffee and I click on this one right here, there's an image. Now, if I want to update this page, I'm going to be forced to type in all of this because of the logic that we have, but I don't want to lose the URL. So I have two separate functions here set up. In the event a user puts a URL, it's going to replace it. If a user does not, it will leave it as is. So the way this logic is set up is you get to the last statement, and this is up to you if you want to add this. But if the end of your logic, you just want it to update, you can actually remove these three items right here entirely because they are not needed. But I want to give the option. So if you got to the end of your if statement and all of it's there, every user is required to have everything. So the last if statement is simply not is empty page var URL. So if the page variable URL is not empty, it's going to perform this post request. You'll paste in that URL plus the new item URL. So you literally just paste this in, then go down here and choose the HTTP method as patch because we're updating. Ignore headers. And in the request body, as I'm sure you expected, this is a lengthier one. So you see all this. How do you find this? Again, if you want to copy this over, very simple. Go to your Firestore or your Firebase database, and you're basically going to copy that information. So for you, yours could be a little different. What you need to do is find one of these URLs that has the information that you would need to update for this specific instance. So to do that, wherever your URL is, the easiest place to check is going to be your data resources. So we're going to go find coffee post. And all you need to do, if you remember, is copy this. We're going to paste it up here. And then you're going to come down here. So actually, I think I may have accidentally clicked something. So we'll copy this, go up here, type it in. And then we'll go down here and copy this. And then we're actually going to need the page. So for example, here, if you we're going to cut this and go paste. And you'll see we may have multiple options. So one option is this one right here. So this is how this works. When you check on this page, so for example, if we cut this, this is how that Firebase is set up. So we paste in the new one. So this is basically the page. So this is how this works. The last half is that new item URL specific, and it actually goes ahead and puts all of this here. So this is the new item URL. Here's all the data that's basically being displayed. So what we want to do is, now that you have your URL, in our data request, make sure your URL is filled out correctly. And then we're going to scroll down here, and in the request body, we are going to basically be pasting in, if you remember, just what we did before. Everything from the double quotes with fields all the way down to the last open bracket just before the comma. Copy this. Then we're going to go over to AppGyver, and in our formula page here, so again, this formula is the request body. We are just going to go open bracket, close bracket, and paste everything in the middle. So this is where it's all going to be pasted. And if you remember from before, the way that this is set up, when you paste it in, it's going to have string value, and then the value is going to be to the right in parentheses. So for example, if you were to paste yours in, when you're doing the patch request, you're just going to remove all of this, so you'll have your double quotes, Control V. Looks like it didn't copy it correctly. So we'll remove this. Control V. And again, it's all in green. The only changes you have to make is to the right of every single option, so description. To the right of that, you'll see string value. And all you need to do is replace what's to the right of the semicolon. So you'll remove this, and you're going to type in your page variable for whatever the new item is. So new company, replace the URL. So that's the general idea. So this is the convention. So I'm going to cut all this. I'm going to go back to the page in case you're a little lost. So you'll see here, we're giving users the ability to update. So each one of these is a page variable for this item again, so they can update it. So when we go to update, this first HTTP request means if the page variable for URL is empty, this happens. If it's not empty, this happens. So with the URL we've pasted in, we've chosen patch. We're going to go back to request body, and we're going to paste in everything I just had. And just again, to the right of every instance of string value, we're going to put in the page variable for the item that represents. So for description, this would be page var description, or new description as I called it. And these are the page variables for all of these items. So the page variable for URL, so you see your string value, and over here is this giant thing in quotes. You will simply remove from the right of the quote all the way over here. And then this is just going to be your page variable for the new URL. So you'll see we have page var URL. Once you've added in all of the page variables, again to the right of string value, and clicked save, your update button is set up. Now that is if the new page variable, or the new image URL is not empty. So if someone has information here, it's going to post to it. What if they don't have information? Well, it's the exact same thing. So you can copy this data HTTP request over here. So to do this, Control C, and then you can Control V to paste it. But we're going to make one small change. So if you look at the body of this request, you have the same URL, but the actual body of the request, you'll notice here that it's a slightly different post request. So this one has a URL. When we go to this one, it's all the same information. The difference here is you'll notice when we're going through all of this content, I left out the URL for the page variable, and I made it the page parameter. So what happens here is if this for example, if a user leaves out the page parameter, or the new item URL, this is going to instead just leave it as it is. Now, if you don't have this, so if you're thinking, okay, well, there's an easier way to do this, we could just cut this piece out entirely. So if a user doesn't enter a URL, just cut this out. It will still mess it up on the back end, and that's why we have to set the logic up this way. So this way, these two, again, are identical, except in this one, if you have an item here that you do not want the user to lose, then there's an if statement saying is empty page var URL, which is the page variable for the new image URL. And if it's empty, then we're going to do this. If it's not empty, then we're going to do this. So here's the only difference. In the request body, the URL on this side is the page variable for URL. And if it is not entered, then we're going to scroll over here. And in the request body, we're going to change that URL to the parameter. The parameter is what's already on the page. So when a user is on this page here, the page parameter for URL, or for image URL, has already been added. So we are good to go. So you're just making sure that that stays the same so that we send the same URL over. Super simple. Then we have a toast dialog updated successfully for both. Now you may be wondering, where's the image? Well, we haven't actually pulled an image on this page. So the last thing, when you drag your image over, that image is going to have the value, that's the parameter URL. So again, every item here, and the image is not displayed, and that is only because there's no value for it right now, but each of the items up top are page parameters because it's information that's going to be pushed to it. Each of the items below are page variables because that's what we're allowing users to enter. And the update button makes sure that we're sending, in both cases, a patch request to this URL with the information in this request body. And the only difference in the bodies here is simply that there is a page parameter, which is the information already on the page if the user doesn't update it. If the user does update it, we go with the information they have. Either way, we tell them it's updated successfully. Now, it may get a little confusing if you don't see the image here, and that's completely fine. So when you're scrolling down on your tree on the right-hand side, you'll see we have a ton of content. The general idea is all you need to do if you want an image URL displayed, minimize this, just simply drag over an image, pop it in here, and on the source, you're going to put data and variable, page parameter, you're going to choose the image URL. So you're going to create a parameter, or sorry, this is a data variable. So when you're choosing this, essentially you're going to choose the value for the image. And when we're in our variables, you'll see we have a couple of different options. Now, typically with the source, the tricky part about this is we can't set a page or data variable here. What we need to do is we need to make this a formula. We'll go to formula, remove all of this, and we'll type in page, and this is going to be a parameter. So we'll go to page parameters instead, and you're going to choose the URL for the image, and you'll just click save. And when you save this, that image URL that's going to be displayed is actually going to be the image itself. So for the example, when a user posts the URL of an image, it'll publish here when the user clicks. So it's that simple. So again, super quick run through. Up top we have, for example, you don't see it, but there's an image right here. And the value of this is just the parameter URL. So these up top are page parameters. These down below are page variables. Page parameters are pushed from another page. Page variables are entered in on this page. So we've basically saved everything here. So now you should have everything set up. Now when the user clicks on this page, This is the instance for the the light page. So when we're on this page here, for example, you've created your forum page. When you click on this, it's going to push us through and open a certain page. Then it will essentially open up whatever page we were just on. So this is your app. Again, it's kind of filling out a little bit more now, just to kind of walk you through what we've done. This is the coffee item page, so these variables are entered in. The page parameters are pushed through. So just to show you what it looks like when we're actually posting this. So when you go to your coffee wall like I had earlier, this is where people post. And then if you want to see the posts, you can go to the coffee wall itself. And then the way that it works is the page that we were on not too long ago. When you click on the item in the corresponding page, what we just set up was a logic to set the app variable and then open the page for that item. Now we just set up one page, and I know that sounds like it was a lot of work to do that, but you don't have to make tons of different categories like I did. So if you just wanted to make something short, sweet, and to the point, then you could just stop with one or two categories. But the way that this is set up, again, the way that the data variables are in repeat, it's pretty simple to get this set up once you've done it a couple of times. So right here, we have light roast. Everything we've done in this video and in the previous videos, you would repeat and do the same for light medium. It's the same logic every time. So you're going to have the logic to set the app variable and then open the page. And then essentially what happens is you're going to tell it, how do we connect everything on that page? So in your logic here, when you've selected the item that's the link, select your open page, and here's the last step. You just need to choose your page parameters here. So if you remember not too long ago, I was showing you here the page parameters at the top, which is the item or the information that's being pushed. It's the same situation as the forum from earlier on in the series. So we're going to tell this, okay, what goes where? We've set the app variable so we know the page. When we open the page, we want it to be the new item page that we just made earlier. And we want the page parameter for company to be that corresponding data variable. Now, if you haven't added this, again, really simple. Go to Data, add Data Resource, and follow the steps like we did here. Name the resource, set a description. The resource URL at this point should be kind of ingrained in your head. And then you're going to choose the projects and the name of the resource. So this can be light for your light roast, medium for medium roast, etc. And that's your actual name. Put in documents, hit test, run test, and then you're going to set a schema from the response. And once you've done that, you have this data variable in repeat. So we are going to set the page parameter for this. So it's going to be current. Choose the values that match up with what you want. Then you're all set. So the page parameters I had on the other page, I had a created time. If you remember, I had company, I had description. So you're just choosing the page parameter. This section right here is what's listed on the other page. This is the value that you want it to be, and that repeats. The page parameter on the other page is named URL. It's roast, and you're just choosing the data item in repeat that corresponds to what you want to display and be pushed through to that page parameter. And then when you click it on the next page, it will be displayed. So that pretty much walks through how to create this application. So at this point, you'll see we're just going to walk through and make sure that we've kind of created everything together. So what we've done so far, we created a login, create new account page. I've recommended that you make your own terms and conditions and privacy policy, maybe have a little disclaimer. And then this picture right here is actually a picture that's stored as a data variable, so you can change it on the back end. And then when you sign in, you'll have the ability to post. You'll have the ability to see all of your posts separated. You have your own forum page. And then if you want this cafes page is the exact same thing as add coffee, just more simplified. So that's all that there is to it, everybody. So we've basically created this together. I showed you how to create the first forum, and I showed you how to create this first light roast section. You just duplicate those steps for all the information you want displayed, and you'll have this app probably looking much better than mine, but you'll have it up and running. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to walk through actually creating the file and publishing this to Google Play and kind of finalizing it from there. I'll see you all in the next video.